And I remember this to this day. Again, I don't know if these were his exact words, but his sentiment was, yeah, man, I hope we make a good record. I knew him before he was famous, and I think that had a lot to do with it. Patient he was, the teacher in him, that came through. His love for the guitar, show me and explain it to me, and I kept doing it wrong. He never once said, no, man, that's not right. You're tired of my attempts, or you know, hey, man, you know, enough of. He never said that. So the more I tried, the more I butchered it. Yes, it came out as quarter notes. So I do it, and I doing it, and then I did it right one time. And I write about it in the book. And he goes, yeah, man, that's it. That's good. I mean, that's like...
Today, I'm very honoured to have Stephen Rosen, who is a legend, who has interviewed many rock stars from the 70s onwards, including Michael Jackson, Eddie Van Halen, and literally hundreds, if not thousands of others. So thank you so much today for coming on my podcast, sir.
Very welcome, Nikos. Happy to be here, buddy.
How's it going today for you?
It's great. It's great. We had Christmas yesterday, and actually yesterday is also the first. It was also the first day of Hanukkah, which is only like the second or third time that the first day of Hanukkah and Christmas fall on the same day in like the last 100 years or so. Anyway, you know, I had a good day with the family and ate way too much food, and you know, gave out some presents that the little kids tore open, and played more with the boxes than the gifts themselves. But it was a good day, you know.
So, Stephen, you're the only guy that I know with a time machine, because literally we can go on to your YouTube channel, and it's a portal to like you sitting down, hanging out with like Eddie Van Halen. You got this sort of lo-fi tape recorder. He's just coming off some concert. He's just chilled out. There's people outside the hotel room trying to listen in. He's smoking, and you're like, don't smoke, but you're cool because it's Eddie Van Halen. So, man, exactly. How did you get into that field of your like first interview with like Joe, I believe, Joe Cocker?
The famous Joe Cocker. I was writing a little bit for this little local piece of trash newspaper, to be honest with you, called the LA Star. And it was one of those newspapers, you know, you put the quarter in the machine and you pull it open and pull out a copy. I had sent them a couple of live reviews, and they printed these live reviews. This is before I was really writing per se. I mean, I had no connections with any labels or publicists. I just like, you know what, I'd like to write about music. So what is it that I could do? I could do live reviews. So I went to a couple of concerts. In fact, the first couple of shows I reviewed were T-Rex and West Brisbane Lang. And I sent the reviews, and they printed both of them. Fast forward a little bit. That was like early 1972. So mid 1972, I'm talking with my buddy Chris Kinderman, and we decide to go to Europe and hitchhike around. The music editor for the LA Star somehow had this list of names and phone numbers of managers and publicists. How he ever got them, I don't know. I was skeptical that they were even real, but he said he had them. He said, hey, listen, go over there, and you could be like our European correspondent. You know, go do some interviews, write some stories, and send them back, and we'll print them. I go, okay, great. Again, thinking that was never going to happen. Thinking that there was a slight possibility they might happen, I actually brought a cassette player with me that I had. This cheap little cassette player that I would go on to use for years and years and years. Literally, man, it was a piece of garbage. Horrible. With this cheap little $2 microphone that you plugged in, that worked half the time, didn't work. So we go to Europe, we're hitchhiking around, then we came back, and I think we stayed in London, the UK, for about 3 weeks before we were going to fly home. So I had this list of names, and I just went down the list and picked one. And I see Max Clifford. It just says Max Clifford Management. I had no idea who he was, what he did, if the number was going to go through. So I go to those, you know, the famous red phone booths in London, you know, and I put in the pence, whatever it is. And the voice comes on the line. Hi, Max Clifford's office. And that shocked me. I thought, oh my God, this is really it. So I go, hi, my name is Steve Rosen. I'm a writer from the States, and I'm over here, and I don't know what I said, man. Can I interview your
Obviously
artist?
worked, right?
Yeah, can I get a free T-shirt? I mean, I didn't know what to say. I didn't expect to talk to anything. And she says, oh, yeah, let me put Max on. I talked to Max Clifford, and he treated me like I was John Steinbeck. He goes, yeah, he goes, we have Joe Cocker coming in tomorrow. You want to interview Joe? I go, yes, that'd be great, sir. I'll interview Joe Cocker. So I had no questions. I didn't know I was going to interview Joe Cocker. I couldn't go type on a computer to go pull up Joe Cocker and find out all this information. So it's like, so the night before, what do I know about Joe Cocker? Well, I knew he was at Woodstock. I knew he had done that amazing cover with Jimmy Page of of The Little Help from My Friends. I knew Feeling All Right. So I go in there the next day, and I am introduced to Max, and he walks me into the little room they had, and there's Joe Cocker sitting on the other side of this table. And I'm telling you, man, I was so terrified that honestly, I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I'm going to make an idiot of myself, but I couldn't walk away. Obviously, I couldn't walk away. So I sat down, and I set up my cassette player and said, please, God, let the cassette player start turning. And I can see the capstans running. And we just start talking, and I forgot the first question I asked. Something about you're touring or something. And he goes, yeah. I go, then I asked him about something else, and he goes, yeah. I go, oh, my God. But then we got
That's
into
horrible
it.
when that happens.
Oh, my God. My stomach sank, and I thought, there's the career. I'm never going to interview anybody else ever again. But as we got into it, I felt a little momentum, and he would say things that would trigger stuff. I knew about the Grease Band, who were an amazing band, his backup band, and I knew about some of those players. And it was amazing. It was remarkable. I sent the story back to Mark Yandel, was the music editor's name for the LA Star. And when I came home several weeks later, there it was. Steve Rosen in London talks to Joe Cocker, and that was the first one. And it was remarkable. And I thought when it was over, I thought, my God, this is like the biggest shot of adrenaline you could ever imagine. I want to do this again. It was terror mixed with adrenaline, mixed with a moment in time. My God, you're speaking to one of the greatest, singers ever. You can do this. Let's see what comes next. As it turned out, I did a couple more interviews while I was there in London. I was actually offered Queen before the first record came out. Tony Brainsby was their publicist, and I had sort of befriended him. He actually let my buddy and I sleep like in his office. He was just, these people were so amazing, to this complete stranger. And he said, hey man, I've got this band Queen coming in. Here's the acetate of the first record. You can go listen to it. And I thought, oh, Queen, that's a little too glam for me. No, Tony, I'll pass on that.
Oh, bro.
I literally could have done one of the very first, if not the first interview with the four guys. I would later interview Brian May a couple times, but that one I really regret. I had a chance to sit in on like an interview with several other journalists with Paul McCartney. This is when he was doing that, I think he called it the university tour. They piled everybody into this bus, and he'd pull up to a university and no one knew who they were. And they say, hey, can we play at your, can we play here in your auditorium? It was with several other writers, but I was in a room with Paul McCartney. I remember holding my microphone out to him, and I asked him the one question I could think of, and are the Beatles going to get back together? And he laughed. He goes, well, I don't know. But anyway, so I did do a couple other interviews while I was there in England, and then I came back and kind of used that and started reaching out to other magazines. So that was the beginning for sure.
So what were you terrified when you first walked into the room with Joe there?
It was several things. I have always been and remain to this day, and I've tried not to be that way, my own worst critic. So I thought, I'm not prepared. And then I realized that the gear I was using was garbage. Um, uh, I thought I would be embarrassed. I thought that Max Clifford would say to me, "Hey, you wasted my time and Joe's time," and I couldn't deal with that. So it was all these maybes, things that might have happened. My perception of what I'd done was just it was inadequate. Like I said, the interview was good for not knowing that I was going to do an interview with him and just kind of being prepared. But I was just afraid of all those things. I was afraid of failing. I wanted it to be perfect, you know. Um, I listened to it and I go, "Oh my God, why did you ask him that stupid question? Why would why would you ask him? Did you like doing wood stuff? What a dummy!" And I've asked myself that question for the next 50 years. And I asked myself that question in Tone Chaser after listening to my interviews with Edward and writing about them and going, "How could you ask him that question? What a moron you were!" And what I did in the book, to let people know how stupid it was, I put a little section in the book called Notes, where I'm commenting on myself. I'm like this omniscient third person looking down and looking at this writer, Steve Rosen, and going, "God, that Rosen's a fucking idiot, man. Why would he ask Edward Van Halen if he was playing well in 1978? What kind of an idiot would ask that question, you know?" So I would reflect on myself, and I'm really hard with myself, man. So it was all of those things. I always felt like I could have done better. It was inadequate. Why did you say that? Why did you do that? Um, I tried to heal myself of that, and I don't know. Maybe I've gotten a little better, but probably not much.
So how soon was it from your first interview until you got sponsored by, I think it was Rolling Stones magazine, to do this, like, I guess, part full time or whatever it was?
Yeah. So the first story with Rolling Stone was Bad Company, the first record. So it's really funny, man. So if I probably really started writing probably late '72, maybe early '73. And the interview with Rolling Stone, I'm sorry, the story, which involved an interview with Bad Company, came about with their first record, which was '74. So I really hadn't been writing for that long. I had been sending them letters probably since I first, entertained the idea of being a music journalist. In fact, I have somewhere on the walls behind me, I have all the rejection notices, and I have one from Rolling Stone. It's this little card that says, "Oh, we're so sorry, that we can't use your story," or whatever it was. And I had rejection notices from all the magazines that I ultimately wrote for: Guitar Player, Circus, Cream. So I would send ideas to Rolling Stone. I'd send them live reviews, not realizing that Rolling Stone didn't publish live reviews. I mean, that's how stupid I was. I kept pitching ideas, though. When I heard that Bad Company was coming out, that was going to be Paul Rogers, guys from Mott the Hoople. I knew the record was going to be amazing. I was a huge Free fan. Paul Rogers was the singer for Free. And I sold them on the idea. So I think that came out in late '74. So I'd really only been writing, I don't know, you could call it a couple of years before Rolling Stone ran that story. It was a short story. It was like half a page. But I thought, my God, man, I'm in Rolling Stone. I'm like, I am king of the world. Nothing's going to stop me now.
It's insane, man. It's like all the benefits of being, I guess, a rock star without the downsides of being. Except you can travel with all the different ones. So if you fall out with one, you can travel with other guys, and you don't have all the pressure like they have. You're just like observing, and you get to like meet all these musicians that you like because you're obviously a musician yourself, and it's unique. I mean, I don't know if there is any jobs like that exist today.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, Nikos. It was all those things you said. I mean, look, I would have paid them to have sat in a room with Paul Rogers and Jeff Beck and John McLaughlin and Joe Walsh and Aerosmith and I would have done it for free. I mean, honestly, I would have. Um, I don't know for how long I would have done it for free because we all
Yeah.
need to earn a living. But truly, I was. It was just the right. I was in the right place at the right time. All these music magazines were just coming out. So Guitar Player magazine had only been out. I think the first issue came out in '69. I started writing for them in '73. They needed content. They needed freelance writers, and I was the guy. I became the go-to freelancer. Uh, Excuse me, and that's why I did all those amazing stories for Guitar Player, Jeff Beck and Joe Walsh and Frank Zappa, McLaughlin, um, Joe Perry, Jimmy Page. Um, but yes, man, being a music journalist was amazing. There were a lot of perks. So I was on all these labels, mailing lists from the record labels. So I was getting all the new releases every month from all the labels. And they were sending me T-shirts and buttons, and I was getting to fly um, all over the country to do interviews. And on top of that, I was getting these amazing tickets and backstage passes to the concerts. And I'd go to clubs and I'd get these tabs. I didn't really drink, but I brought my brother along and he would drink, or they'd give us free food and all these parties. I mean, the money was never great. I was probably making, I think Guitar Player, I think I was making $75 a story. But $75 a story in 1973, it's like, my God, I'm a rich man, I'm a king. But it was all these other perks, all these other things, and you're hanging out with these people. It was an amazing gig. It was pretty extraordinary.
I mean, a lot of people don't
Yeah,
understand how much pressure these musicians have just trying to crank out the latest album, rehearsing. It's exhausting, and it's like you just got to tag along and see the best bits and backstage passes, and it's just. And you've also, I guess, you've seen the ups and downs of that lifestyle. And I know you mentioned in one of the comments somewhere that it's obviously very sad seeing people pass away. I've only had one of my guests pass away, but it's difficult to watch that interview, and how much more so yourself.
absolutely. So, look, we think about Van Halen on the road and having the amazing hotel rooms and flying first class and having these extraordinary tour buses and making lots of money. And that's all true. But on the other side of that is you're away from your family. Van Halen would go on tour for 8 or 9 months. And with Edward, he would come back, and I'm sure it was the same with a lot of these other people I interviewed. Then they have to come back and work on a new record. So they'd be in a studio writing. That's hard. I mean, you have to be wired that way. I think when guys say, "Man, I want to be in a rock and roll band," and they look at being on stage and selling records and making the money, but they don't look at that other side of it. And being away from the family, the pressures of coming up with that second record. Look, the famous line is, they've had a whole lifetime to write that first record, right? They've been kicking song ideas around with their buddies and their bandmates for years. And now between the first and second record, they've got a year to write a second record. And oh my God, what do I do? I haven't written, I don't have like another 50 songs written that we can do. So there's that pressure. Not a lot of them will say, "Oh my God, I was so under so much pressure." They won't say that, but that the pressure was there, especially from the label. Look, you guys had that big single. You need to come up with another big single. That's why so many bands, back in the 70s and 80s, they would come out with one record and then they were gone. That second record sometimes wouldn't even be released after being recorded. There were pressures. And the thing that I've always found amazing is that all of these musicians sort of got these bad habits after they found success. I'm not saying that they weren't doing drugs or they weren't drinking before they were famous, but I think being famous allowed them the type of lifestyle, money, because it takes money to buy that stuff. to indulge themselves as much as they wanted, and no one was ever going to say no to them. And I've seen that a lot of times. And look, I'm not pointing fingers, but we look at people like you know John Bonham passing away, and I'm sure that the rest of the band were close friends. But did they ever tell John, stop? We're gonna kidnap you and put you in a room for 3 weeks until you dry up. I mean, those types of things don't happen. That they didn't happen. Yeah, a lot of unseen pressures, and again, we were talking earlier, Nikos. I've probably done, I don't know, man, 2,500 interviews in my life, and I look
2,500.
and I made this list one time, and I didn't do it to be morbid, just because I did it because I was curious, and I haven't updated the list because I don't want to do that, but I know that 10% of those people are gone, and it could be 20%. I mean, it's just and just in the last few years, guys have passed away that I've interviewed, and so it's terrible, and a lot of these guys do pass away. Look, I mean, I think the normal lifespan of somebody now is probably 80. And if you don't live to 80, it's like, oh my God, But a lot of these guys are still, Edward was 67. That's not very old, man. He
It's
had a
young, man.
horrendous, he smoked cigarettes and he drank and he did drugs. And so anyway, yeah, I think there are a lot of pressures. Look, nothing in life is free, and being a rock star isn't free either. Look, any musician would love to live that lifestyle, would love to have that fame and that acclaim and that bright shining light. But there's that other side of it as well.
It seems to me that so many musicians are chasing that elusive goal of fame, but then when they get it, it's like it seems like a burden to them because they don't think like how it would be nice to just like go to the cafe, chill out with some friends without worrying about some random person coming up in the street wanting to hug you, saying "I loved you forever."
That's really true, and even more so now, a thousandfold times more now with the internet. So somebody goes out to eat and he doesn't leave a big enough tip, or there's some party and they say something incorrectly. Uh, uh, Angry fans, saying, "Oh man, that last Aerosmith record was the worst I ever heard," and Steven Tyler, he couldn't sing anyway. My God, that's horrible. I mean, I don't care who you are, and a lot of these guys will tell you they never read their press. Don't believe it. Look, they may not read every single comment that goes up on YouTube or any of the Facebook sites, but they're aware of what their fans are saying. So yeah, there is that pressure, and Edward, I mean, he would go out once in a while, and there's that famous little shot. He went to a Tool concert, and some fan came up and asked him to take a picture, not realizing it was Edward, and that's become huge news. But it's not like you saw Edward out at 1,000 parties or going to 1,000 concerts. He was really uncomfortable, and I wrote about that, and I saw that up close when we would go to NAMM shows together. NAMM is National Association of Music. I always forget, merchandisers or merchants. I think it's merchants. So once a year, all of the manufacturers would get together to display their new line of guitars and amps and drums and keyboards, DJ stuff, social media, microphones, blah, blah, blah. And they'd all gather there. They'd all have booths. And, people would come, and buyers would come from stores around the world, to place their new orders for their new line of Fender guitars or, whatever it is. And Edward was, endorsing guitars there for a while. And I went with him and I saw what it did to him. And after an hour of signing, posters and doing this, he was a nervous wreck. I saw it. I saw it up close. He would drink more. He was uncomfortable. He couldn't do it anymore. So he would just leave. He just didn't like it, And it's funny because I remember the night when he asked me, he goes, "Hey man, the guitar company," and I don't want to name this guitar company because I think they used him a lot, so I don't even want to use their name here, but he said, "Hey man, they want me to endorse one of the guitars." Every voice in my head screamed, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Why would you put your name on a guitar? You could tell this company you want these guitars built to your specs, that you'll play them, but you're not going to put your name on them." He didn't think that way because I don't believe that he had a sense of his own legend, what he brought to the world of music. But so they would trot him out like a dancing pony, and it got to him. It really hurt him. And so, yes, I think fame, that kind of thing, not being able to go to the market, not being able to go out to eat, not being able to go out to shop at all. Yeah, I think that's fun, but I think after a while it becomes, oh my God, I need to send one of the crew out to do something. Yeah, I think that's an unseen negative that comes with fame at that price. Yeah.
I think one of the best illustrations of this is in the actual Dune novels, not the movie because it missed some of the points. There's a part in the book where Paul Muad'Dib becomes Muad'Dib and he's recognized as such. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dune stories. Battle for Arrakis movie.
I'm sorry. Just marginally. I think I read the first book. Saw the first one. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So Paul, the main character in the novels, this isn't covered in the movie. He's recognized as, in a sense, the leader, the great leader, Messiah, whatever you want to call it. But it says that one of his leaders in the army, when he recognized that he was the Messiah, he immediately changed from being a friend to being a follower. And it says that in that moment, Paul realized he'd lost a friend, he'd gained a follower. So I think that makes fame quite lonely. You're surrounded with you sort of friends that are just followers are not really friends. They're just, you can't really relate to people. And I think famous people, they must just want to be recognized as an ordinary person. That's their greatest desire in a sense, because you can't communicate with somebody that just looks up to you like you're some object and you're not a person. I think that can make it lonely. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, man, Nikos, that's an excellent, wonderful question. I love how you put that, and that is precisely, when I think about it, and I've thought about it a lot, why we became friends. Edward and me. Can never get that one right. So I first met Edward in July 1977. This is 8 months before the first record comes out in February 1978. They hadn't gone on tour yet. They hadn't opened for Montrose and Journey. Edward had played around Hollywood. He had played the clubs. They had gravitated from sort of these outlying clubs out in Pasadena where he grew up, making it onto the famous Sunset Strip, playing Gazzarri's, then playing the Starwood, which was another local club, and finally playing the Whiskey, which was sort of the apex club on the Strip. You played the Whiskey, you sort of arrived in a sort of Hollywood scene. Previously, that's where all the bands used to play. It was a very famous club. Zeppelin played there on their first tour over, because nobody knew who Led Zeppelin was. Alice Cooper played there. I saw, the Allman Brothers play there in Chicago. I saw the Beach Boys play there. All these bands Cream played there. All these bands played there before becoming famous on their first tours from England. And a lot of American bands before breaking big. So Van Halen was just a local band who had signed a deal with Warner Brothers. Everybody knew about that. I knew about that. The other amazing thing was I had never seen Edward play before I met him. I was at the Whiskey
Brilliant.
A lot. I was at the Starwood a lot. A couple times a week at each of these clubs. How I had never seen Van Halen play, to this day, I can't figure it out. I would see him play afterwards, of course. So when I met Edward, he was just this guitar player that people were talking about. Oh, you gotta see this guy Edward Van Halen play, man. He's really good, and the band's really good. And they got a deal on Warner Brothers. I was introduced to Edward by Michelle Meyer. Michelle was the girl who booked the whiskey. I was a guitar player in a band back in the day, and she used to book my band into these other little clubs that she worked with, you know. So I loved her for that. I loved her. She was so good to me. She said, "Hey, there's somebody you need to meet, you know." And if Michelle wanted me to meet somebody, you know, no questions asked. There's somebody I
Yes,
need.
ma'am.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. So we walk up the stairs. My brother Mick and I are there that night at the whiskey. We're there to see Cheap Trick, who were going to record a live record. And I thought, wow, Cheap Trick recording a live record at the whiskey. That's worth seeing. Whiskey was a very small club. Cheap Trick hadn't broken yet. The next year, they would record live at Budokan in Japan and be huge. But now they were still, you know, a band that people knew about, but they weren't huge. I'm there to see Cheap Trick record this live record. We go upstairs to the dressing rooms, and we walk in, and I see this guy in the corner, and I'm pretty sure I recognized him. Again, you have to understand, this is July 77. There are no stories about him. Cream and Circus haven't run any stories. No one has interviewed him, really. I've probably seen his picture on flyers, because there were always flyers, you know. They would put flyers on all the lampposts around town when they were playing. So I'm pretty sure I recognized him. So we walk over, and she introduces me, and you know, I shake hands. And again, to me, he's just a local guitar player who's got a deal on Warner's. I say, just look, man. I was in a band. I would have cut off an arm to have gotten a deal with anybody, and he had scored a deal on Warner Brothers. So I'm thinking, my God, Van Halen, the band, they have to be a good band. He's got to be a good guitar player. But you also need to understand, man, that my standards for guitar players were extraordinarily high, right? So I had grown up with my heroes were Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend and Robin Trower and Paul Kossoff and David Gilmour and Gary Moore. These giants, you know. So if you weren't like, you know, if not on the same level, at least, you know, not too far underneath them, it just didn't resonate with me. I wasn't trying to be a snob, or maybe I was a snob. I don't know. So, you know, so we go in and we start talking. Oh, and Eric Clapton, and he plays a big part in this story. So we start talking, and he didn't expect to meet anybody. I could tell he was just standing there, you know, smoking a cigarette, waiting for Cheap Trick. So I felt like a little bit like I was invading his space, but so, hi, man, you know, we start talking. I don't know what my first question was, you know, but somehow we get onto Eric Clapton. I knew everything about Eric Clapton. I mean, I knew every note he played with Cream, John Mayall, the Yardbirds. He was in a bunch of blues bands before. I knew a lot. And if I'm talking to you, Nikos, and you made some comment about Eric Clapton that I thought was not up to snuff in terms of what I knew, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I got to go. I couldn't talk to you. If you didn't know that about Eric Clapton, you're not worth me talking to. I mean, I wouldn't be that rude, but I would, in my head, I would dismiss you. So I kept expecting, I didn't expect him, but I figured he's going to say something about, oh, he was going to make some comment. And at that point, I was going to go, he doesn't really know anything about Clapton. He can't be a good guitar player, you know, that kind of thing. So we're talking, man. And we talk about Cream, and he loves Cream, and I love Cream. But then he starts talking about Eric, his actual playing. And yeah, man, you know, his vibrato and his phrasing. And I thought, oh my God, this guy can take a deeper dive into Eric's playing and his technical stuff. I mean, I understood it as a guitar player, but Edward really got it. I thought, oh my God, now I'm really impressed by him, you know, because I thought, oh my God, he knows more than I do. Oh, so we're talking about Jeff Beck and Richie Blackmore. I asked him about his album deal. You know, I go, my God, that must be great. He goes, yeah, man, you know, we got a deal. And I remember this to this day. Again, I don't know if these were his exact words, but his sentiment was, yeah, man, I hope we make a good record. Well, I'll tell you, man, if it was me who had just scored a deal on Warner Brothers Records and you were asking me, I go, fuck yeah, man. It's going to be the greatest record you've ever heard in your life. He was not like that, and he was never like that, which made him such a remarkable person. Fast forward 8 months, the first Van Halen record comes out. I hear it. I don't think it's very good. I listened to it the next day, and I realized, oh my God, how amazing it was. To get back to your initial question, the reason I believe that we connected. Oh, at the end of our conversation, he runs out of the room, comes back, has a piece of paper. I was writing on the paper, hands it to me, and it's his phone number. He goes, hey man, I really like talking to you. Call me again. The reason he did that, the reason this conversation was amazing, excuse me, I believe, was because one, I didn't know who he was. He wasn't Edward Van Halen, who would become a legend in less than a year's time, opening for Montrose and Journey. And like you said, now has a million followers, and who could he trust? Who really cared about him? I knew him before he was famous, and I think that had a lot to do with it. Before I'd ever heard him play, and it's not like I heard him play, and as I'm talking to him, going, oh my God, this is that guy. He plays like that. I want to hang out with him. I want to, it was none of that stuff. It was just two people who got along. I really honestly believe that he felt something in me that, hey, this guy's okay. I think I can trust this guy. He knows about music, and maybe we can be friends. Look, I'm maybe overstating it, but I believe that's what it was. And in answer to your question, I wasn't a follower. Look, I had extraordinary respect for him, and at no time did I ever forget. My God, this is Edward Van Halen. This guy, is changing the face of music. But I tried never to let that come into the conversation or the friendship. I was always really honest with him, and he was honest with me. And so, yes, I think that's what it was. I don't think I ever became a follower. So, and I think he respected that.
I know that he gave you a lesson on tapping, and he was doing triplets, but you were doing quarter notes or something like that. Exactly. Was that the only lesson?
I think that's the only one that he would ever he ever had the internal fortitude to show me. We would get together other times, and he'd just be noodling, and I go, "What's that you're doing?" And he kind of played again, and not in a million years could I play it. But what that chapter on him showing me how to do a triplet revealed was, one, I was a marginal guitar player at best, but two, more importantly, was how patient he was, and the teacher in him, that came through. His love for the guitar came through, and him willing to sit there and show me and explain it to me. And even more so when I was doing it wrong, and I kept doing it wrong, and I kept doing it wrong, he never once said, "No, man, it's not right. You're that's," or getting an attitude, or being tired of my attempts, or him, enough. He never said that. He never even got to that point. It was always, while I was doing it, I remember he was still, he was doing his thing, but I could tell he was listening. And so the more I tried, the more I butchered it. Yes, it came out as quarter notes, da 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 da. And then I asked him, I go, well, how are you counting it? He goes, well, it depends where you count one, which confused me even more. I thought, oh my God, So I do it, and I was doing it, and then I did it right one time, and I write about it in the book. And he goes, yeah, man, that's it, that's good. I mean, that's like sitting there with John Steinbeck, and I bring up John Steinbeck because I think he's the greatest writer who ever lived, and he's my favorite. It's like sitting with John Steinbeck, and he's reading all your stuff, and he comes to one line, and he goes, wow, that's a good line. It's like it's like all you would ever have to hear, right? for any musician. I don't care who you are. I don't care who is sitting there next to him. And I know, guys, look, the greatest guitar players in the world have this absolute admiration for Edward. And when Edward returned that respect, that was everything for them. So for him to say that to me, again, one of the biggest things in his life was respect, and him showing me that respect was like amazing. It was just amazing, and he showed that.
He's probably someone like Eddie. He's practicing 10, I don't know, maybe between 4 and 8, 10 hours a day. But you also have another job, so like he probably understands that. Okay, maybe this guy's only practicing 1 or 2 hours a day. He can't expect you to play like him.
I think sort of mechanically he thought that way. Honestly, I don't know. It's funny, and I just want to touch on this real quick, and it's a great question. I don't think he truly. I mean, look, he understood that I was a music journalist. I was a rock journalist. I wrote for magazines, but I'm not sure that he maybe understood exactly what that entailed about listening to records and doing interviews. I mean, inherently he did, because he did many interviews, but I don't know if he thought that was something that I did an hour a day, an hour a week, 3 hours a day. I don't ever think he thought about it that way. I think he just thought about, I'm kind of an amateur guitar player. Whether he thought about I had this other gig, I'm not sure. Maybe he did. I knew a lot of people, and I don't think he ever understood that I knew these people. Look, I'm not saying I was great friends with them, but I knew a lot of people and had contacts. And I write about one chapter. He became good friends with Steve Lukather, and I had known Luke for many years. And I remember he asked me at one point, "Hey, what's Luke's number?" And I don't think I'd ever told him, one, that I had Luke's number, two, that I even knew Steve Lukather. So I'm not quite sure that he thought that I knew every other guitar player out there in the world, that I didn't know any of them. Anyway, I'm not sure what his thoughts were on what I did as a music journalist, or how many hours a day I spent. But he gave me a lot of leeway in my playing, and never once said something that would just have crushed me. He just never did that, and he never did that to other people as well, unless you disrespected him. And then that's something he did not forget or forgive. So, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about that time as a non-smoker when Eddie would come around to your house and just...
Oh my God.
Chimney smoke, like...
Smoking. So back in the day, let me just back up just a little bit, Nikos. Back in the day, before they banned cigarette smoking everywhere, in California at least, and that it wouldn't happen for years actually, but you can no longer smoke in restaurants or clubs, airplanes. You could smoke anywhere. So I would go to these clubs, or there'd be these parties at restaurants, and nothing to do with Edward, because this is before I had met Edward, and the cigarette smoke. I've had migraine. I used to get migraine headaches, and I got them. God, I can't remember when I first started getting them. I was pretty young, probably mid-teens, and they were horrific pain. I mean, they were 8 hours of agony. Your head feel like it was being torn off. It was brutal. So bad that people used to go to the hospital, and they would literally get shots of Demerol or morphine to ease the pain. There were people, and I hate to be graphic, but I want people to understand how terrible the pain was. People would commit suicide. Oh, I can't stand my migraines anymore. They were horrific, and my brother also got them. So anytime I'd go out to a club, it's like, oh, please don't let me get a headache, please. And also, any kind of alcohol could trigger it, so I never drank. I never liked the taste of alcohol anyway, but this was doubly why I never drank. So the first time I met Edward, he's smoking a cigarette, and I can remember during our conversation, the cigarette smoke, and thinking, oh, please let me be okay. He comes over to the house sometime early 78, hard to remember. Oh, I'm sorry, late 78 is the first time. Um, and we've been communicating. We had phone calls. I may have been up to his house in Coldwater Canyon, which was just about 8 minutes away from where I lived in Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. And he was always smoking up at the studio, up at his place. And so he came over. He was going to play me the unreleased tracks for Van Halen 2. I thought, oh my God, this could be amazing. So he comes over, and he comes up the steps, and he's got a cigarette in his hand. And my first instinct was, oh my fucking God, what do I do? One, I was terrified I would get a headache. Two, the smell, oh my God, the smell would linger and linger, because if you're not used to the smell and then the smell is there, you could really smell it for weeks and weeks. I was going to say, Edward, put out the cigarette. And I could have done that, and he would have completely understood. But it's like, yeah, I couldn't bring myself to do it. You don't tell Edward Van Halen to put out a cigarette. And I know I'm a hypocrite, to end all hypocrites. I couldn't do it. So he opened his door, and before he even comes in, he goes, hey, man, we need to go down to the car. He had just bought this garbage piece of crap car he was so proud of from money from selling the first record, And we go in, and there's a monster boombox, and he rolls up the windows, and he's smoking, and the interior of the car is filling with cigarette smoke, and I go, oh my God, what are we doing, And he plays me all these tracks, I think it was just maybe guitar and drums. I know there were no vocals, maybe bass, and I'm listening thinking, oh my God, listen to that. At the same time, it's like the smoke is burning my eyes and it's filling my lungs, and he's smoking one after the other. The ashtray's overflowing. It's like, oh my God. So it was terrible. Then we get done, finally get out, and I can breathe some fresh air. And we go into the house, and again, I was going to say, Edward, please don't smoke in the house, which I didn't. So he comes in and he smokes, 100 cigarettes, and it was terrible. But in all the times I was around him when he was smoking, and that was 100%, I was never around him when he wasn't smoking, which was horrible and terrible. And I knew, and I write about it in the book, that cigarettes they're gonna kill a guy. The drinking won't kill him, and the drugs won't kill him. That won't help, but the cigarettes will kill him, and they did. They did. He developed cancer of the tongue, and that led to other complications. But in all the time I was with him, I never got a headache, and I don't know how that ever happened, but that was terrible. I hated seeing that. And every picture you've ever seen, he's got a cigarette. And in the cover of my first book, a photo by my very good friend and Van Halen photographer Niels Lozauer. This amazing picture of Edward, and the cigarette is jutting out of his guitar strings, which he'd always do. He'd always jam them between the strings up the neck. I had the cigarette airbrushed out. I didn't want it on the cover. There's a photo inside. I think he's sitting on a chair and he's got a cigarette, and I left that one in, I think. But I didn't want that cigarette on the cover. I just didn't want it. So anyway, yeah, it was a horrible addiction he had. But yeah, I never got a migraine being around Edward's cigarettes. So how that happened, I do not know.
I used to go around my friends when we were playing Xbox, and I would open the windows when there was smoke. I also struggle very much with smoke, and I'm so glad that it's been banned from public places.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, so Edward ultimately was able to go to vaping, which arguably, again, I don't know. They say his vaping is actually worse than cigarette smoking. But again, it's very telling. He was able to stop the drugs and the drinking, but could not stop the smoking. It's horrible. It's horrible, terrible disease.
Why do you think that doing the 1 hour signing stressed him out so much?
One, in a strange way, I don't think he felt comfortable being around crowds of people like that. Look, you're going to say, "Oh, Rosen, you're an idiot." You played concerts in front of 20,000, 100,000. I go, "Yeah, that's different. That's not Edward walking around down in the audience. That's Edward once removed on stage with a line of bouncers, doing his hour and a half set, getting into a limo and driving back to the hotel." And here's another quick story, Nikos. I took Edward to go see Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. He was a huge Blackmore fan, and that blew up in my face. And I don't want to give that story away. And if you want to know about that, go buy Tone Chaser. I'm kidding, but it's a wonderful story. And I had good seats. I got them from the label, and I thought, oh my God, how great would it be to bring Edward to a Blackmore show? Wouldn't that be great? So we get there and we take the seats, and within, I'm telling you, man, it was 1 minute. I looked around. Edward was unaware of it. I don't think he was unaware because he wanted to be, or it just wasn't on his radar. But man, I could look around and I saw it. I saw it instantly. People going, I saw them pointing. I saw them whispering. I saw girlfriends, talking to boyfriends. I saw girls going. I saw it, man. And I knew that was going to happen. Sitting out there in the audience.
That's horrible, man.
It was horrible. So just real quick. So I see people starting to walk over and line up, and they want to shake his hand. And I'm thinking, okay, but then it got to a point where it's like the line gets longer and longer, and I can see he's uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm a small guy, but if something happens, look, Edward could take the shit out of me. He could take care of himself. But it's like he's this precious diamond. You brought him. Something's going to happen to him. A drunk guy's going to, get in his face. But these people loved him. But at a point in time, I saw it, and it didn't last long. Probably like 5 minutes. And I said, hey, Ed just wants to watch your show, and they were all respectful. And they all went back to their seats. But he just didn't like it, and that reverential thing, he never liked that. He never liked people looking at him like this. God,
absolutely.
He was uncomfortable with that. He knew he was a very good guitar player, but having people kind of bow down and do that thing, he never was comfortable with that. And being at a signing, that's all these people are, is like, proselytizing right before the God. I don't mean to get religious, but it was religious. I saw these people were in tears.
It's psychotic, man.
And it bothered him. He didn't like doing it.
I even like play small things in places, and like I like being on the stage playing and getting some interaction with the crowd and stuff. But I don't like it afterwards when people saying, "Oh, this is really, really good guitar playing." I just want to. It's on. It's there. We play. It's done. Normal life go on.
Exactly. And you've experienced it, and you have your feelings at the level of guitar player and fame that you have. So if you multiply that 1,000 times, Edward or any of these guys, and we touched on it earlier, what that must feel like. And now you have to sort of, do I have to live up to what these people think of me? And does that lead to drugs because it's easier to escape into that? I mean, somewhere it's all tied together, I believe. But yeah, it's not an easy thing. It's not.
Do you think that if you are offered the choice, do you want this fame and subtract 20 years from your life, or do you just want to have like a normal life with a family, comfortable living? What would people pick if they had the chance?
You mean if I had the chance, or if
anyway, like a rock star now, if you asked them that question and they had the chance to relive their life again, what do you think they would pick?
Oh, someone who has achieved fame and at that level.
Yeah.
I've talked to some of those people. I'm trying to think who I was talking to. I honestly, I think they'd all say, listen, I wanted to be famous and successful, but if it meant sacrificing my family like this, no, I would have never done it. I believe that.
Wow,
Yeah,
bro.
I I
That is
I
so
believe
profound, man.
I believe that. Um,
Couple of minutes. Like we could talk about that. We could go into whole religious and philosophy discussions for, you know. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, musicians want growth, right? They
hmm,
want their music to be appreciated by more people. They love being on stage and interacting with the audience. Myself, I cannot. I'm always looking for opportunities to play. You know,
I know,
um,
I know.
I want to
Yeah,
transition like almost maybe to part at least being part time musician, and maybe I'll take it as far as it goes. I just love. I want to create music. I just feel this drive now.
yeah. No,
But I'm 40, so it's like I'm starting. I'm starting music middle age.
no, I get it. You know, I mean, my brother plays drums. Excuse me. In cover bands, they actually play pretty regularly. Once in a while, I'll go up and jam. You know, on a Tom Petty song or something. You know, and that feeling. I know what that feeling is, man. That it's like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Even though I don't practice and I play like garbage, it's like, wow, this feels so good. It's a completely different feeling than writing and uh, the book writing side and to have people read the book and comment, oh, I love the book and I love your writing. I mean that means so much, but it's completely different playing the guitar, and I don't know what that is. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, I guess look, I guess couples get divorced. I like to look at the percentage of couples, spouses of famous guitar players, and see what that percentage is. I mean, you have to be a special kind of a person to be able to deal with that. Um, you know, um, I don't know what that is. I don't think I don't think musicians ever get enough of that. But on the other hand, the sacrifices when they look back, has that been worth it? I I think that they would have probably cut down the touring. They wouldn't have toured as much as they did to accommodate a family more. I don't know. Um, it's hard, because I know that when they're on stage, like when you're on stage, it's like there's nothing else in the world. I mean, it's that feeling is just astonishing, And so to be able to play in front of large audiences, my God, that must be, I can't imagine what that would feel like.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine. He's got a YouTube channel called Bad Brad, and he's got him. You need to go on his podcast or show. It's I'll ping him. He talks about he is like he was on the Sunset Strip. Now he's moved to some other place. I can't remember what it is, but he talks about the coming down from the stage high is something that a lot of people can't cope with, especially as their body and age catches up with them. It's very hard to come down from the stage high.
That's an excellent point. I was talking to somebody else who says he doesn't know what to do when he's not on tour. I mean, he literally,
Wow.
and this is a pretty big time guitar player. I wish I could remember who that was. I mean, this is somebody who's famous and made money and toured, and he does not know what to do. But yeah, I can imagine getting off stage after, my God, something like that, and this isn't exactly analogous to what you're talking about, Nikos, but in the book, in Tone Chaser, um, uh, I was doing a story for Guitar World, and I flew out to I forget, Chicago. I think I was to see Van Halen. This is 5150 era. Sammy was in the band. I think this is the first tour with Sammy, and they had just sold out whatever arena it was. I mean, there was, I don't know, 20,000, 25,000 people there, and um, afterwards, I was staying at the same hotel as Edward, and so we went back to his hotel room, and I just wanted to say, my God, what an amazing show that was, and this and that. Look, maybe he had been doing it for such a long time that he didn't feel that anymore. But and I'll be honest. I think I read about, we took some drugs, and he drank, and he picked up a guitar and played. So for Edward, I don't know if there was a whole lot of difference between being on stage and just coming off stage and doing that. But there's a knock on the door, but now it's like 4 a.m. or something. And I thought, well, for somebody to be knocking on Edward's door at 4 a.m, it, I thought it could only be one of the band. I mean, who else is going to knock on him? The crew isn't going to knock on his door for, maybe some fan found out where he was staying, but even then they're not going to knock on his door. Anyway, Edward opens it, and it's Alex. And Alex comes in, and Alex has been there right along with Edward from day one, right? Edward has never played with another drummer. Alex has never played with another guitar player. They were there doing backyard parties in Pasadena. Obviously, they were brothers. They were kids. They were, playing in, elementary school bands. Alex has all the fame and money that Edward has. And Alex came in after playing this gig that, was mind-blowing. It was just amazing what a spectacle it was. And he comes in, and he was upset. He was like, and I write about this, he was like on the verge of tears. Edward, they always write about you, and they always want to know about you. And I know it's not exactly what you're talking about, but here he's just come off stage from this concert, and it means nothing. And again, they've done a lot of high-profile tours, but I think there's a lot of guys, they get to that point, and yeah, you think that energy would feed them. I think they get off stage, and it's like, I'm lost. What do I do? Do I get high? Do I drink? And I think all that's tied together. Yeah, it's an amazing phenomena. And again, tied into this a little bit is, I can remember hanging out with Edward for when he went out on that first and second tour. The first tour, they're opening for Montrose and Journey, and then Black Sabbath. By the second tour, they're headlining. So their ascent was incredibly fast. But it was those first two tours. I know that he was happiest, and I can tell you, although I was never there when he actually came off stage, but I know he would come off stage and just feel elated and, feel all of that energy in a positive way. That feeling like, hey, we just kind of blew Montrose and Journey off the stage, and that kind of thing. But I think as those tours went on, I think that feeling dissipates, and it's like, well, what do I do now? And again, with that, it was always writing and playing guitar. But I think with other musicians, it was like, well, what do I do until the next tour? Or I'm writing now, but we got to get back into the studio. So strange thing for sure.
You almost have to have music as a secondary thing in your life so that wouldn't happen. But then again, you're never going to get to that point unless music is your obsession, right? Because you just have to put so much energy into this instrument to get to the point where you're going to do these big concerts.
Exactly. And I did have this conversation with my good friend, Jimmy Waldo, who's still my very good friend. Jimmy was the keyboard player and co-founder of a band called New England, which had a hit and were managed by Kiss's management, and did some opening tours with Kiss and AC/DC, Ted Nugent. And then he was also the co-founder and keyboardist for Alcatraz, which is a band that had Yngwie Malmsteen in it, and then Steve Vai. And he told me in New England that with him, there was never a thought of any second kind of a job, career, a fallback. he used to drive like 150 miles each way a couple times a week to rehearse with the band. And he said, had we not done that, we never would have had the deal in New England. And I had that conversation with somebody else. Again, a high profile guy. And I said, well, was there ever a sense of if music didn't happen, would you have done something else? He goes, no, never. Edward never had a second job. He and Alex used to paint the numbers on curbs, the addresses, just to earn money to be able to buy guitar strings and gas for the van to drive to a gig. But it's not like, hey, you know what? I'm going to teach guitar or, excuse me. And I asked him, I said, Ed, if all this hadn't happened, meaning the tours and the fame, what would you still been doing? He'd go, man, I'd still be playing the whiskey. And I think that's what all these guys would tell you. Hey, I wouldn't be playing Madison Square Garden, but I'd be playing clubs, and I believe that because I do believe that to make it as a musician on that level, there cannot be a fallback at all. I truly believe that you have to give 100%. You have to be willing to sacrifice everything. And I know that these musicians did. And I saw that connecting tissue between all of them because I would interview a lot of these musicians in the 70s when their first record was coming out. So it's like, hey, well, what were you doing before this? You go, well, man, I was in the band. I was practicing guitar. It wasn't like, oh, I was, studying to be a school teacher or a bank clerk. Again, they may have had a part-time job to pay bills. But I saw that. Later on, you see people like Paul Stanley and high-profile guys, Ronnie Wood. They got into painting, or maybe they started a line of coffee, or they had an imprint on wine, or they were, they were writing books or something. But that was after the fact. That was after they had been successful. Hey, I've got this money, this name. I'm going to, I want to be a painter. I want to be a writer. I want to, own a winery. But that only came after the fact. And it takes a certain kind of person to be able to give those sacrifices. I would have given anything to have been in a band writing songs. But the journalism was always there. I saw the journalism as a springboard, but I was not willing. I wasn't able to give the journalism up to pursue music 100%. I was terrified of it. I thought, I can't do that. I'm not going to starve. I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm not going to have. I can't deal with that. So for me, I wasn't able to do it. These other guys were.
I've got an idea for you as a new career. Counselor to aging rock stars, man. I mean, it's a big need, right?
I think there is.
I'm not Jewish.
And
Nobody's perfect.
I always thought I could have been a really good counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist. I was as screwed up as anybody, but I could deal with that. But I really believed I could see these. I could see this stuff, and I think I could talk to these people in such a way that they would understand that, in a way, journalism becomes sort of an outlet for that. I mean, I can sort of express who I am and my opinions and my feelings, and maybe people connect with that. And I think it really happened with Tone Chaser, but I think it happened earlier in my writing. But I love the idea, and I think that's what my relationship was with all these guitar players that I interviewed, bass players, drummers. I knew I was not the greatest journalist in the world. I mean, I knew that. I was very honest with myself. I mean, there were guys out there writing for Rolling Stone and then later Mojo and Classic Rock. I mean, these guys were crazy.
You are great because I tell you, you 100% are great. Not because of the cleverness of your questions, but you had these musicians feel relaxed around you, and you have this format that is, I would say, better than the ones we have today, where you have these perfect studios, perfect mics, 100 cameras, editing team. It's just literally a tape recorder. You press play, you don't know if the mic's working. I used to record stuff when I was a kid as well. I had one of those recorders. I know what it's like. I didn't have a mic. I just pressed. I used to record me wrestling with my friends and stuff. I wish I kept those tapes, man. So that is it. You got the person to open up. On you go. Sorry.
Right, man. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's what it was. I mean, I was able to do that. Was it a conscious thing? I think what happened was, like anything, the more you do it, I could sense things. The order of questions, if you jumped around, and I would sit in on some interviews with really good writers, and I could see them jumping around, and I could see it in the face of the musician. It was like an odd jump, and it didn't connect with them, and yes, I believe that's what it is I brought to it. I was a good enough writer to write the stories, and being able to connect with musicians on that level. That's what I brought to those stories. And I think that's really what Tone Chaser showcased. I mean, that's really what it was on a big scale. In that writing on those pages. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. So yeah.
I think what gave Eddie the longevity, minus the smoking, was also the fact that he just loved to play. People always are commenting they love the way he smiles. He just loves the music, and if you're playing music for the music itself and you're not chasing fame and fortune, you just want to keep pushing the envelope of music, then that's something that is out of reach, and therefore you have a goal and it's in front of you. It's something you can keep going towards.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and it was always about the music. And honestly, Edward loved his family. He loved being married. He loved Wolf. I think Wolf was great for him. I think it changed his life. But very rarely did any of those things come before his music. I mean, he really, that's all he did. And yes, if Edward hadn't been the Edward Van Halen we know, the icon, it would have been Edward Van Halen playing in some small club, writing songs. That's all he never knew how to do. You see in a lot of guitar players, yeah, you have that sense that they are once removed from you, and that they're untouchable on stage. And I can never think of Jimmy Page going to the guitars, the music shop, buy a set of guitar strings. Edward would do that. There was something very human about him, and that's what people connected with. And I think that's what elevated him from extraordinary guitar player to icon legend. Because there are a lot of great guitar players around when Edward was coming up, but they somehow didn't have that one XY chromosome that Edward did. And I think it was that connection he had with his audience that went, like I said, I saw it at the NAMM shows, sitting with him in a concert, that went beyond just loving his music. I mean, it was a love for the guy. I mean, they loved him. They adored him, and man, that's rare. That's wow. And I just think that came from, that felt like, wow, yeah, if I ran to Eddie on the street, he would hug me and we'd be friends, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but they felt that was true. So, yeah.
Man, we could talk about EVH for hours, man. It's...
Well, we could do a part.
Tell me about your music. You're still an active musician and songwriter, I believe.
Well, look, I have a guitar. Pull up some YouTube channel. and I've reached out to some of these guys who do instructions on YouTube, and these guys are so scary good. It's like, and I always have this reaction. It's like they're too fucking good for me to even look at them, because I'll never be that good in a million years. It's a reverse thing. It's like I read the writings of these amazing journalists, and I'll go, I'll never write like that in a million years. So part of it's this ultimate jealousy, and part of it is, incredible respect for what they do. But in answer to your question, I play a little bit. I noodle around with ideas. Really, the last music project that I did that I'm really actually proud of is a project called Highway Sentinels. Excuse me. So back in the day, I was writing songs with my buddy Jimmy Waldo, who I'd mentioned. We used to write all the time. We were looking to try to get songs placed with fans, that kind of thing. That never happened. But along the way, we wrote some really good songs. The 80s, it was kind of like, I don't know, man, kind of Foreigner, kind of heavy melodic stuff. They were good songs. Jimmy's manager, Giles Lavery, heard these songs. This is, I guess, about 5-6 years ago. And said, hey, man, if you could kind of update these songs, make them a little heavier, I could probably get you guys a little deal. So Jimmy and I revisited the songs. We kind of did some rearranging. And I was playing on these songs, mainly like rhythm parts. But I went back, and played some heavier rhythm parts. And we found a singer, David Reese. David was a singer in a band called Accept, and a couple other bands. Really good singer. And we kind of revisited these songs. So he took these songs, which had singers and melodies and lyrics that I had written. We removed everything, sent him these sort of updated tracks, and he wrote new lyrics and melodies. And the project was called Highway Sentinels, and we had a deal on this a little label called Louder Louder. I had reached out to some people I had interviewed and asked if they would, hey, would you play a solo? And to my astonishment and glee, they did. So I thought, well, I'm gonna shoot for the stars, So I reached out to Joe Satriani, who I'd known for many, many years. I'd interviewed many times, who was just the sweetest, greatest person I'd ever met. Said, hey, Joe, I wrote this record, and I know you're busy, man, would you put a solo on it? And Resback goes, yeah, man, send it to me. I'll put something down. And he says, I'll have something for you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to the day, he returns this thing with this unbelievable solo. And I could tell by the solo that it wasn't something that he had dashed off in 10 minutes. Look, he probably did it in an hour, but he still took an hour to a Joe Satriani. So I thought, oh my God, now I've got Joe Satriani on a song. Now I reached out to, Tracy Guns and Joe Stump, Matt Heafy from Trivium, Paul Gilbert, some amazing guitar players, and they all came up with these amazing solos. And so the record came out, and I thought it was really good, man. I was really, really proud of that. It's like a junkie who's, not taking drugs for a while. Then he, does drugs again. It's like, oh my God, that's what I missed. That's why I did that. It's like, it felt so great, And I think we sold a few copies, but it was just a fact of being able to be creative a little bit again and playing some guitar. That felt great. That was pretty amazing. So, in as much as, I'm a weekend warrior kind of a guitar player. That's kind of what I do. But I'm happy that got out there. So, yeah.
Joe Satriani is almost an adjective, because you could say this is a Joe Satriani level track,
Yeah, exactly.
It's standard.
Exactly. And it's funny, I joke with Joe. In fact, I sent out the email to after the guys had recorded these solos, and they were all amazing. and the truth of it is, obviously, none of them had to do that. I mean, I had interviewed all of them. Did they owe me anything? Not really. I would like to think that a small part of them thought, hey, you know what? Steve Rosen interviewed us back in the day, and he supported us. Let's do this. Maybe they thought about that. Maybe they just thought, hey, Steve Rosen, yeah, I remember, yeah, you interviewed me, I want to do this. But I sent them out this email. Go, hey, thank you for playing on the record, man. You play great. Look, I didn't want to intimidate you. I played a solo on one song, and it was nothing like the solos he's played. It was these guys. It was more like like a slow David Gilmour, a couple notes, and I did my thing. It was good for what it was, but it was nothing like what these guys played. So I joke with them. I said, hey man, thanks for playing the solo. I hope I didn't intimidate you too much with my solo. You guys are still real good guitar players. So keep it up, or something like that. But yeah, Joe's amazing. All these guys were for doing that. And Joe was a great supporter of the book. I sell books on Amazon, and I see an order from Joseph Satriani, who lived up in Northern California, and I knew Joe was from Northern California. And I thought to myself, well, there can only be one Joseph Satriani. And they put the addresses in Amazon. So, I'm sorry, they don't put an address. You can
maybe it's just a really keen fan,
Exactly. You can connect with them. I said, Joe, is this you? He goes, yeah. I go, Joe, my God, thank you. I said, Joe, I'll send you a book. I'll refund your money. He goes, no, don't do that. I don't want you to do that. No. So that's what kind of guy he is. He didn't ask for a free book. He didn't want a free book. And then later he got the first edition. I said, Joe, would you take a picture with the book and send it to me? He goes, yeah. He took a video, a 20-second video that I put up on my Tone Chaser page of him, go look at this book, Steve Rosen, and I mean,
yeah, I saw that.
Right? You saw that, so that to me is everything. I mean, look, as great as it was that he did that solo on the record, it meant more to me that he was willing to put his name on my book. That meant more to me, because he didn't have to do that. I mean, the book could have been a piece of shit. There was a first edition or other musicians could have said, Satriani, you liked it. You know what I mean? I mean, all those things could have happened, but they didn't, thankfully. But even if they had, there was a potential that wasn't going to stop him from doing that, So that was remarkable.
Joe Satriani, it's really encouraging to see someone still doing really well.
Yeah.
He seems like he's got his head on,
He does. He's amazing. I don't know how many records he's had out now. Lots of records. He still tours. He's out there, doing the Van Halen, the chicken foot thing with Sammy Hagar. I remember, and I had to respond to this, and I never respond to people online. I mean, I'll say thank you or this and that, people said, oh, Joe Satriani, he can't play Van Halen stuff. It just, people are so stupid they don't know that they're stupid. So you can't rationalize with them on any level, The first time that it showed the band, they did this thing on the Howard Stern show. The huge Howard Stern has millions of viewers. It was this early morning thing that they had. It was probably, I know it was the first time they played live together in front of anybody, and they probably just learned some song. And Joe didn't play the solo exactly. It was still amazing. That's when people said, "Oh, Joe Satriani. Why would they choose him? He can't play this stuff. He sucks." I wrote back. I said, "If you think Joe Satriani can't play Edward Van Halen, you just don't have a clue about anything." I try not to get rude or abusive, but then of course what happens? Joe goes back, does his homework, and nails all that stuff. Now there's been nothing but these amazing comments about Joe bringing this other facet to Edward's playing. Yes, he plays all the solos, but he's also bringing Joe Satriani to the music, which is what he should be. If he's not going to do that, then just go find. There are a million guys who can just cop Edward's solos. But yeah, Joe's amazing. He's really one of the rare ones. Steve Vai is
I can
also
see.
another guy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can see why these guys are Steve Vai and Joe Satriani endorsing you, because you are the guy with this time machine. Like, you can go to your YouTube channel and listen to this stuff from the 80s and 70s that it's so lo-fi comfortable. It's just, I'm shocked that there's not massive podcast interview. Like, hopefully that's going to change, because you should be on much bigger podcasts than my sub 2K podcast.
Yeah.
For real, man.
Well, I appreciate that, and Steve is great, he's also supported the book, and he wrote a nice blurb on the back of the cover of the new record. Steve has recently been touring with Beat. That's the band doing those King Crimson songs. Tony Levin, Adrian Belew, and Danny Carey from Tool, doing that '80s era King Crimson stuff. And I went and saw the show. Steve got me tickets, and he said to me, "Yeah, man, I want you to see the show. I really want to hear what you have to say about it. I mean, the fact that he would be interested or care enough about my comments about his playing, means
Well,
a
it
lot.
makes sense, right? Because you have spent literally your whole life, 2,000 plus interviews, whatever it is. That in itself is like multiple PhDs in psychology of these kind of people. So yeah, it's an important opinion for sure,
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
It's great to see musicians like Joe and Steve Vai and Mal's team, Ingwe. I think there's a joke that EVH talked about like learn to pronounce Ingwe. That was so funny. It's like they're on YouTube giving back to the community. And I think also it was a real tragedy that the late Prince, he was getting ready to share the secrets of how he recorded, and like I'm fascinated to know how Prince had this output, his process. I want to learn about it, because that is just. But then he passed away before he could share that knowledge. How you go into a studio and you've got a song in your head. Obviously, you can't play the guitar and drums at the same time and sing, but that process is so interesting. Does he go down and lay the drums, and then he layers the bass, and then he layers the other 20 instruments that he's got on there?
Yeah,
it's great to hear giving it back.
Yeah, no, that was terrible. His passing. I actually wrote a book about Prince. I've never interviewed Prince, and I personally don't like those kinds of books. Somebody writing about somebody and you've never met them. To me, I'm not saying good books can't be written that way. I don't like doing that. But I was approached to write the book, and I did. This was back in my younger journalism days, and they were willing to, pay me decent money. So okay, I'll do this. But I did interview his engineer, who worked on a lot of his stuff. He used to record out here at California, at the record plant. And he was an engineer at the record plant. And he'd say Prince would come in, and he'd come in, and within 8 hours, the song was done. He would play everything.
For real, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how that happens either. To be able to hear those parts, what the drums are going to be. Look, did he go back and tweak or edit? Probably. But yeah, it was other. I mean, it was pretty amazing,
I love that about him, because he was able to just live with imperfections. Like when I open up Logic and I have 100 synthesizers, I just have writer's block. Where do I start? But he was just like, okay, I'm not going to spend, or I think Susan Rogers, his sound engineer, says like he doesn't spend a week trying to get the snare to work perfect. He just goes in, and because his arrangement is so good that maybe there could have been a better snare or a different effect that could have sounded better, but he just like, the music can tell its own story,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were just, very few songwriters like Prince. So, other people have to worry about a good drum sound or, miking the vocals properly, because maybe they're not, at a level of Prince, excuse me, and most of them aren't. But yeah, no, I totally get that.
So what's next for Stephen?
So the main pursuit is Tone Chaser Volume 3, and you know, getting these books that are left out there into the world, and doing podcasts with you and various podcasts, and reaching out to musicians, and having them take photos with book, and promoting on Instagram and my YouTube channels, YouTube and Facebook. Getting the book out there that way. So I keep thinking about the idea of a volume 4, fourth edition, which would entail there's a couple chapters that didn't make it into any of these editions. I was going to expand the photo section. There was a section in the back where I have comments by musicians. I have some extraordinary, excerpts from different musicians that I had that weren't in there. So I thought about that. Maybe doing a fourth edition. I interviewed Jeff Beck in '78. Actually, I interviewed him in '73, '75, and '73 and '75. I came out with a book about Jeff in '78 that came out in Japan only. I was writing for a Japanese magazine called Player. And they said, "Hey, write a book about Jeff Beck." Jeff Beck was God in Japan. I mean, he was huge over here. Over there, he was a god. So I said, Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck was and still is my favorite guitar player. I think he's the greatest who ever lived. I think Edward is one of my top 10 guitar players, but I think Jeff is the greatest who ever lived of all time. Nobody ever played like that. No one ever will. He could have played anything. Anyway, I thought a book on Jeff Beck, yeah, that I can do. So I wrote that book. So it's just kind of been sitting there. Again, it only came out in Japan. And I thought about revisiting that. I actually interviewed Jeff again in, was it '86, the Guitar Shop album period. So I have that interview that's not in the book at all. It's going to revisit it, rewrite it, put it together. I wasn't friends with Jeff like I was with Edward. It's not that type of book, but I did do a lot of interviews with a lot of musicians he played with, and I think it's a pretty good book. So I've been thinking about maybe doing that, short of that, I'm not sure.
I think you could have the most amazing music podcast in the world if you were just you, Joe Satriani, just those guys coming on your show and doing that for me would be like, I would 100% subscribe to that on the bell.
You're very kind. And
I'm very fussy.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, man. I really do. I don't know what it is. I guess one, I'm not a technical guy, and everybody says, "Oh, you can do it, this and that." I'm really, really, really bad with that stuff. So hooking all that stuff up and doing that, and then it's the idea.
You can get a tech to do that. That's not difficult.
Yeah.
An average tech would do it, no problem. I don't know how much it would cost, but I'm sure one of your friends could fork up the $200 it would cost to do it.
Yeah, and it's not even money. I guess for me, it's about doing it sort of when I want to do it via YouTube. And maybe it's, I don't know what it is. Maybe I think if I do it every day, it doesn't carry the weight, or people get tired of it, or I don't know what it is. I mean, I've had other people say that to me. I'd much rather sit here and talk about Edward with you than sit here and do my own podcast with Edward. I can do a little 2-minute intro on an interview, and then you can listen to that interview, and that I'm cool with. But doing the whole thing, I don't know what it is. But
it's not easy. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe somewhere down the road.
That interview this is another thing about what you've got here. You've got this interview with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
No one has done anything like it. And as far as I'm concerned, where he goes into the process of making music And it's a really funny interview where he has his sister as a translator for you. I don't know why that is, because you're talking to him anyway after the questions asked. I mean, that is how did that interview come about?
Exactly. It's funny because I haven't actually listened to the interview in a while because I'm so uncomfortable listening to it. But yeah, it was amazing to me. Honestly, I was not I liked Michael Jackson. I recognized what kind of an artist he was. I wasn't a monster Michael Jackson fan like millions of other fans were. But given the opportunity, said, "Hey, you want to interview Michael Jackson?" I thought, of course, I'm there in a heartbeat. So again, and it's hard for me to pinpoint the time. I think he was still touring with the Jacksons, and he had just come out with Thriller, or I get my chronology of him,
I think it was just before Off the Wall or round about then.
Off the Wall is the first one, right? Then Thriller, right? So Off the Wall had come out, I think, but I think he was still touring with the Jacksons. So all the Jacksons were there, and again, they take us into one of these huge conference rooms at the label, and I look around, I see Michael Jackson, and I kind of recognize the brothers, sort of, and there was several writers, and they bunched us off. Each of the Jacksons were sitting at different tables, and I lucked out. I was able to sit down with Michael because some of these other writers didn't get to talk to him. That Tito was there, and I forget the other names of the guys, but they only
Jermaine
and Jermaine, exactly. And so I sat down, and there's this girl sitting there. I thought, no, I didn't know who it was. His friend. I knew he had sisters, but So I asked him that first question again. What's it like working with your brothers versus your solo? And he turns to her. And he goes, and he doesn't say anything to her. And he's literally turned. Is that a 45-degree angle away from I was looking at you? And she goes, "Yes, Michael, I know that you work." This is her time. "Yes, Michael, I know that you work with your brothers and you do solo. And is there any difference? And how would you say that? And he turns back to me and kind of looks at me and not really, says, and he doesn't say anything. And I'm waiting for a second, and this goes on for 2 or 3 questions. Honestly, and I mean no offense to anybody whatsoever, please don't. I just thought he was uncomfortable talking to a white journalist. And I mean that in the nicest way. Obviously but I thought, and then I thought, oh, he's just goofing with the white guy. I mean, nothing negative whatsoever. But I thought, that's what I thought. And then at a point, you can hear it. We kind of start talking to each other, and he turns out to be an incredibly sweet guy. I think he's just incredibly timid, as a bigger personality. He just seemed so fragile and timid. And this is before. I mean, he looked amazing. And I don't know if he had any work done. He was an extraordinary looking guy. He was the most talented person on the planet, but there was something, man, that was so fragile about him and timid. Maybe that's what it was. He needed to hear the questions first. And I'm just thinking about this now before responding. Maybe he wanted Janet to get the sense of what it was like to be in front of press, because maybe she was thinking about it. I don't know. And I shouldn't have said that thing. I meant that in no negative way whatsoever. But, it's like I was uncomfortable. I thought, he doesn't want to talk to me. But then, excuse me, he got comfortable. And then I write about it. The interview was over. It only lasted, 13 minutes, 14 minutes. He goes and walks in the corner, and he starts doing his little dancing thing. But he was in a world that was like he was dancing. Look at me. And, standing 10 feet away from Michael Jackson dancing is like me sitting 3 feet away watching Edward Van Halen play guitar. It was not human. I'm telling you, man, this guy defied gravity. I've never seen anything like it. I don't think anybody ever danced like him. When later, he was getting into the drugs, and I heard all those accusations about him, and I really do not want to believe any of them, and I don't want to say whether I believe them or not. I don't know. But I can tell you, I think that Michael Jackson was the saddest, loneliest person on the planet. I really do believe
Wow.
that. You talk about fame. I think it killed him. It destroyed
Wow.
it destroyed him. I mean, I don't think he had a close friend in the world who didn't want to suck his blood.
Wow.
It's
It's just so heartbreaking, isn't it?
horrible. I mean, my God, to have that talent and to go through that. Oh my God, to not be able to sleep. Oh, bad.
His brothers. I mean, you can see Jermaine. He's crying sometimes on the shows with regret, but they tried to warn him to say stay close to your family because everybody out there is out for your blood.
Yeah, they did. Look, I shouldn't have dismissed the family. However, the father, treated him from what I hear, it wasn't great. Wanted him to be a success, and and his mother allowed things to happen. Again, I don't know. I've never met them. When I've read, but I don't know if the family growing up, at least the parents were loving, supportive. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I'm sure the brothers loved him and tried to talk to him. Terrible.
I think it was Michael that started it all anyway because they had this lot like a single end two. I don't know. It's like a 2 garage sized house, and there was a washing machine. And Michael, I think he was maybe 3 or 2 when the washing machine was going. He was doing all this stuff here, and like I think one of his brothers borrowed the guitar or something, and then that sort of from there,
Yeah, no, I believe that. And I thought his dad was a little bit musical. Maybe he wasn't. But yeah, I mean, extraordinary family. I mean, a shame.
Well, Steve, this has been an absolute honor to talk to you, and I'm so excited to see what you're going to come up with next. Keep playing that axe.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And
I mean, I'll come out with my CD full of amazing guitar playing. Not really, but I'm kidding. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, man.
Music is like a lifelong thing. It's good for the brain, the and ping pong as well. Ping pong is great for the brain and the coordination.
It's funny, man. At Christmas yesterday, there was a ping pong table there at the family's house, and so I was playing ping pong all day, which I loved. I really do love ping pong. Now, there's a game I was pretty good younger. My dad was amazing, and I could never beat my dad, so we'd play all the time, and got pretty good. But yeah, fun game for sure. And then you see like these little 12-year-old girls on YouTube doing these backhanded, seeing those things, and they're like 20 feet apart, returning slams and stuff. That's pretty amazing.
Do you also play chess?
I don't play chess. My dad played chess. He taught me, but I don't think I even remember how the pieces move. So.
All right, I would have challenged you on chess.com, but I don't want to shoot a cat in a barrel.
Let me practice first.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, hopefully I'll have you on again if you got the time. But I really thanks for your time today. It's been absolutely amazing for me, man.
Oh, very welcome, man. Yeah, man. I'll come on anytime. I loved your questions, loved the insights, and everybody go out there and buy Tone Chaser, ToneChaserBook.com. Yeah. Shameless plug.
I'll leave a link in the description.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, Steve. And thanks for everyone that's watching this amazing man with the time machine. And go check out his videos and follow him on YouTube because he should have Well, I imagine he'll have a lot more subscribers coming soon. So
Nice. Thanks, man. See you, everybody.
see y'all.